So one thing that I've been meaning to talk about for a while is all these recent restrictions that have come into place in national parks, especially in the USA and Canada, and how these are basically emblematic of a larger trend of authoritarianism that is being imposed essentially by leftists and environmentalists. Now, the interesting thing about this is that a lot of these restrictions on national park attendance were imposed at least ostensibly because of the COVID pandemic. But in my opinion, that was very blatantly an excuse, perhaps more so than any other COVID related rules. Um, I think it was flagrantly, transparently bullshit and had nothing to do with COVID. I don't think it ever had anything to do with COVID. Maybe early on, but as we learned more about COVID, like it became blatantly well known that COVID does not spread very much outdoors. So, therefore, imposing strict regulations on the number of people who can enter national parks doesn't make sense from the perspective of limiting COVID outbreaks. Now, for those who aren't aware, what has basically been happening lately is that at a number of national parks, for instance, Zion, Yosemite, Glacier, Rocky Mountain, and a few others. Also in Canada, Garibaldi Provincial Park and Mount Robson Provincial Park in British Columbia. They've been starting to impose all these really strict regulations on how many people can enter these national or provincial parks on a daily basis. And these regulations always involve having to register to enter in advance, which is often a very, very stressful process because it involves going online and registering. And the problem is, they do not allow many spots relative to the number of people who want in. So you basically got to go online and enter your information as quickly as possible and hope that you can get a spot. It's a very stressful process. I don't like doing it. It sucks. Like often these spots will fill up within a few minutes. Like at the most popular locations, they could even fill up in like 1 or 2 minutes. In others, it might be like 15 minutes. It depends on, which park, what day you're reserving it for, like whether it's a weekend or weekday. But either way, it fills up really fast. Like if you wait even like an hour after it opens, you're probably not going to be able to get in at all. Um, the only exception might be if you try to register for like a shitty time of the year, like when all the trails are going to be completely covered in snow. Maybe then you might be able to get in, but otherwise, no. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really shitty system, and I really hate having to do it. But, I mean, my point is, these systems were largely implemented supposedly because of COVID, but I think there is almost a 0% chance that they're going away after COVID. And I think COVID was blatantly just a false excuse to do this. I think this is something that these radical environmentalists have been wanting to do for a very long time, and that COVID gave them the perfect excuse to do it. So, why is it that radical environmentalists want to limit the number of people in national parks? Well, firstly, because frankly, tourists are just the most oppressed race lately. I'm sorry, gamers, but you've been dethroned. Like, nowadays, it's just fashionable to blame tourists for everything and to just make life hell for anybody who enjoys traveling places. So that's simply the first reason. That's just part of a larger trend of hating on tourism. But the main reason is they claim that all these tourists, allowing in so many tourists, does damage to the national parks. Now, personally, in my experience, I actually don't see that. Like, they claim that the more people they let in, the more garbage there is on trails, but I actually hardly ever see any garbage at hiking trails at all. And the longer the trail is, the less chance there is of being garbage because the longer trails tend to attract more experienced hikers, and those types of people are by far the least likely to leave trash lying around. So, in the rare occasions when you do see trash lying around in national parks, which to be honest is pretty fucking rare, like I think this is largely a made up problem that they pretend exists but doesn't really. But in a few cases where they do, where it does happen, it's always at like the most popular areas, like areas that are really crowded, and thus it would be pretty easy to just hire people to deal with this trash problem since it's largely confined to a few small areas. And even there, they exaggerate it. They exaggerate the hell out of it. Like this idea that you see people just littering everywhere in national parks, it's bullshit. It's a made up problem. It is a real problem in city parks, in cities and suburbs, in urban parks and suburban parks, absolutely yes. Trash being littered everywhere is a very real problem in urban parks, but in national parks, no, not really. Like if anything is like more than an hour drive from the nearest significantly sized urban area, there's probably not going to be any major problems with that at all. And frankly, it's because the kinds of people who do that shit are the kinds of people who do not tend to move around much. They tend to stay in their own neighborhoods, their own cities, like ghetto type, uh, lower end of the economic and IQ spectrum type people, like basically white trash or ghetto trash, basically those types of people. And those types of people do not tend to go to national parks very often at all. On the rare occasion when they do, they would largely be confined to the most popular areas, like where the main picnic sites are or whatever. And those areas would be very easy to clean up, to hire staff to clean up, because again, as I said, it's largely confined to specific areas. But even then, I think they exaggerate the problem. So if it's not really about trash, what is it? Well, they also claim that like the more people they are, the more encounters there are with wildlife. But again, like I mean, I think that's largely bullshit too, because apparently the wildlife population is increasing at a lot of national parks to the extent they're even allowing people to hunt bears at around Yellowstone. So I mean, if protecting wildlife is so important that they have to impose these absurdly strict regulations on tourists, then why is it that simultaneously at the same time they're also allowing hunters to hunt bears? That makes no fucking sense to me. So that, to me, like this idea like, oh, maybe 3 bears per year are killed because of confrontations with tourists, it's like, so what? Number one, so what? Number two, they exaggerate it. And number three, again, if that's the case, if that's such a problem, then why are they allowing hunting? So again, like, I mean, all these things don't add up. So what is it really about? Well, here's my theory. Firstly, I think it's just about the general fetish that the elite and that a lot of, not just the elite, but frankly, a lot of like status signaling liberals, they have this fetish with just punishing people, denying people access to beauty. It's the same reason why they support modernist architecture and why they support destroying historic buildings. They just, these far left types, these elites and wannabe elites, they're all about denying the common people access to beauty. I don't know if they do it about as a form of punishment or because they hate beauty or because they believe that like the very idea of beauty promotes inequality and therefore people need to be denied access to beauty. But for whatever reason, they seem to have a real fetish for it. Another reason is frankly entitlement. Like, as I've said, to do with COVID, there's this huge entitlement that many people have nowadays where they feel entitled to be the only person for miles and miles. They feel like this hatred, this obsessive hatred of crowds to the point where everybody feels entitled to just be able to hike down a trail and not see a single other person. This, oh, the silence, the solitude, this fucking obsession with silence and solitude. Like, frankly, as I've said, silence is violence in this one particular case. Like this idea that we have to restrict people's rights to go anywhere so some privileged asshole can have total silence and solitude because they're the ones with the fucking fastest fingers when it comes to typing their information in on the registration form for the national park. And frankly, I don't even want solitude when I'm at national parks. You know why? When you have total solitude, that's when you get eaten by a fucking bear. When you're on hiking trails, you actually want to see other people sometimes. Like, you don't want to be the only person on the trail. I've been on that situation before a few times and it's fucking scary, okay? Like, I've been in situations where, like, if I'd gotten severely injured, nobody would have come across me for like 3 hours. And that situation can be pretty fucking frightening. Honestly, like, frankly, these people are not thinking about their own safety, for one, and secondly, it's just very entitled. Also, another thing is, I could even attack these regulations, these requirements from a left wing perspective. Um, they discriminate blatantly against a lot of people. If you're a low income person with a demanding job, chances are you won't be able to get your employer to allow you to take time off work in order to fill out a fucking reservation form at a specific exact time to ensure that you get a space on a hiking trail. They're gonna be like, fuck off, go back to work. And this shit will disproportionately affect lower income people. Furthermore, frankly, I mean, low income people are less likely to even know about this shit or pursue it at all. Like, I mean, it has to do with the whole time preference thing, you know? And they talk about, no people of color on the trails. Well, guess what? Now even fewer black people are probably going to be going hiking as a proportion, because what fucking like black person is going to deal with this stupid reservation system bullshit? I mean, even a lot of white people are going to be put off by this shit. And like, I guarantee you the number of blacks on these trails is going to go down from 2% to 0% because of this shit. So it's like, it actually does unironically foster inequality, because it discriminates against you based on like how fast you can fucking fill out a form, how quick and how stable your internet connection is, and also how free your schedule is, like how free you are in terms of like work, school, family, and other commitments to be able to just fill out a fucking form as quickly as possible at a specific time. So it actually is discriminatory, unironically. And not only that, but like it's arbitrary. Like there's no reason why there should be these severe restrictions on the number of people that can be on a hiking trail or in a national park at a particular time. And this idea that the national parks are completely overcrowded, that's not true. That's only true for like certain specific locations. Like, say for instance, if you go to Banff, yeah, there's a shit ton of people at Lake Louise. But if you go to some of the other lesser known lakes that have longer hiking trails to get there, you'll find not very many people on these trails at all. So again, like, I mean, I think a better solution would be to charge money for parking at some of the more popular locations in the national park. Like, not only do you have to pay to enter, but also if you want to go to like the specifically overcrowded locations, yeah, you can go there, but you're going to have to pay for parking and it's not going to be cheap. I think that would be a more fair way of dealing with this issue. Insofar as it is an issue, but simply banning people altogether from these national parks through these fucking awful reservation systems. Like, no, I'm sorry. Like, it's a blatant contradiction of people's fundamental rights and freedoms, to be frank. I mean, I know like more freedoms, but this is unironically a case where it's like, yes, you should be free to go to a fucking national park. Yeah, like, I mean, no, you should not be free to inject heroin into your arm, but yes, you should be free to go to a national park. And frankly, like, again, this is another step toward bugmanism. It's like discouraging people from going to national parks and natural spaces. Oh, another reason to just stay fucking home all the time. Spend all day on fucking Netflix and fucking Xbox, which is a god to you. Just worshiping staying home, worshiping fucking electronic devices. Like, just becoming a total bugman, like, who doesn't even leave their own fucking house. Like, that's what this is contributing toward. And some liberals think that this is a good thing. I don't. I think it's ruining society. It's ruining humans. It's ruining human interaction. It's ruining everything. And the COVID pandemic is only accelerating it. but it was a trend anyway beforehand. And these fucking stupid national park restrictions are an example of that for so many reasons.